Test-driven development. It's a software development process which is based on repetition, where we try to split our task into multiple iterations how we can complete it. And each iteration is a short development cycle which contains of multiple steps. The first step is when we look at the particular iteration requirements and try to turn these requirements into tests. So we try to clearly understand how the program shall behave and incorporate this behavior in a form of tests. Afterwards, when tests are implemented, obviously they are red because we are missing an implementation. We started with tests. Then we move on to the next step within our development circle, and we try to put a minimum amount of code, a shortest implementation possible, in favor to make these tests green. As soon as our tests turn green, this actually means the software behavior we initially wanted to achieve in this particular iteration of our task works. When it works and tests are green, we are safe to move to the next step, which is called refactoring. Refactoring is where we can polish the code and, if necessary, fix the tests too. We could introduce abstractions, rename variables, move code around, but the test shall stay green. As soon as we polished our code, we can move to the next iteration of our task. Let me show you on a very simple exercise. It requires us to create a getMessage function that would take a number argument and strive to return an output as per table below. For example, if the input argument is positive number, we're supposed to return an apple. If it's negative, we're supposed to return banana. For 0, we return kiwi. However, there is another requirement. If the number is odd, we always return mango. As a developer, I have to grow the skill of being able to split my task into multiple enhancements, into multiple iterations how I can develop it. First, what we try to do is to incorporate the software behavior in a form of tests. Let's do it. The first iteration would be to handle positive numbers which return you an apple. Let's write a small test exactly for that. Let's create an input with a few positive numbers. And now let's try to create a loop and assert within a loop each number to be returning an apple. This is absolutely okay that our getMessage method is not even defined at the moment. Okay, let's run tests now. Obviously the test will fail. At that moment we can create a first commit with a red test. Now let's look back at our circle. So we completed the step 1 with the red tests. Now our task is to go to the next step and put a minimum amount of code to make the tests green. Let's declare a function. That's it. Tests are green and we are ready for a next commit. And according to our circle, we can move on and polish the implementation right away. There is not so much code, but we can already introduce an abstraction. This deserves another commit. Now let's look back at the circle. We made some refactoring by improving the code. Tests were still green. So we are ready to start a next iteration by turning next portion of software behavior into tests. Let's tackle a negative number. Let's arrange some negative numbers. And loop through them, asserting each. Let's look at the test suite. It fails. And that's actually good, because we incorporate in the format of tests a next iteration of our software behavior. Now it deserves a commit. We are done with the commit and we are ready to move to the next step in our circle, again to put a minimum amount of code in favor to make tests green. Let's evaluate whether the number is positive or negative. Let's return an apple only for positive numbers. The tests are green, we put a minimum implementation, and now we are back to the working state. This deserves another commit. We are moving through our circle again, from green tests, now to refactoring. Let's polish the code keeping the test green. Let's introduce a small abstraction here. And we run the test suite, and it's still green. We made a small improvement, but kept the behavior working. This deserves another commit. Now we are back to the starting point, and we can improve our software again by implementing another iteration. Let's handle 0 case, where the output shall be kiwi. It deserves another test, right? We don't have to do any looping here, because 0 is just one input. We ran the test and it became red again. This deserves a commit. Let's put a minimum amount of code to make them green. We are good. This deserves another commit. And let's move to the last step of the circle, which is refactoring again. Let's abstract these two. We run test again, and they are green. Another commit. Now this code works. It's pretty polished, but we could polish it even more by employing math sign method. Let's try to create a map where we would map a mathematical sign to a fruit. Now let's employ that map. And run the test suite again. And it's still green. We got rid of some abstractions which were unnecessary by introducing a map between mathematical sign and a fruit. This deserves a small refactoring commit. Okay, we are good. Much more polished, right? Let's move through the circle once again by implementing our last requirement. When the input is odd, we have to return mango. Let's write a test for this. Let's come up with a few odd numbers. And loop through them, asserting the result. Now we run the test, and it obviously fails. This deserves a separate commit. Let's move on and make these tests green. And we run the tests again. The first one actually passed, but some others didn't because they need a tweak. They contain odd numbers. Let's remove odd numbers to make these tests valid. And run the test suite again. It's green and it deserves a separate commit. While it's green, we can execute the last step of circle by abstracting odd check function. So we did. Let's run the test. It's green again. This way, we implemented this small exercise by using test-driven development. We managed to split the task into multiple iterations how we will develop it. For each iteration, we always started by incorporating the desired behavior in a form of tests, which are red. Afterwards, we jumped into the next step within the circle and quickly implemented a minimum amount of code in favor to make the tests green. When the tests were green, we moved to refactoring and polishing step, where we'll be able to create abstractions or employ some useful methods. Keeping the tests green, iteration by iteration, we completed the task. Now you should be able to understand how test-driven development works.